Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Colin Wilson. I'm the Director of Key Business Advisors. And today we're going to host a webinar for you, which is all about engage your staff to follow your company processes. I have a wonderful person who's going to join me, Maya Trefeska, who's one of our senior HR consultants of Key Business Advisors. And she's going to be assisting me through this webinar, which is all about, as I said, getting your staff to follow your company processes. So thank you very much for joining, and we promise that we will not disappoint you through this webinar. Okay, so just to let you know what this webinar is all about, today's webinar we're going to cover what is the true cost when mistakes happen and understand the value of setting up the right processes linked to your policies and procedures. The best way to roll out new policies and procedures for better staff engagement, and then how to address staff who don't follow company policies and procedures. And then lastly, we'll finish off with setting new goals and objectives for better performance outcomes. Now, what we know, and Key Business Advisors have been around for a long time, is lots of people have policies and procedures and they get them done, and it takes a lot of time and costs money to do that. And they get staff to sign them on their first day. And then all of a sudden, the process or the policy is then forgotten about. And this is what this webinar is all about. It's about how to engage your staff to follow your company processes. So as I mentioned before, my name is Colin Wilson. I'm the Director of Key Business Advisors. And with me, I've got Maya Trefeska, who's going to, is one of our HR consultants. So say hello, Maya.
Afternoon, everyone. Hope you're well.
Good. Yes, it's a fine day here in sunny Melbourne at the moment, but it looks like it's going to get some clouds and a bit of rain soon. So typical Melbourne, 4 seasons in one day. Just a bit of housekeeping with our webinar today. All attendees are in mute mode. You can ask questions throughout the webinar, and I'll get a little red box that'll pop up saying there's a question here for you, and I'll answer those, do my best to answer those questions or refer those questions to Maya. The webinar today is being recorded, and for those who have registered who are not on the webinar, they'll automatically receive a copy of the webinar. For those who would like a copy of this webinar, within 48 hours we'll have this up on our website, along with all the previous webinars that we've done in the past. Okay. What's really important is, I always share this every time we have a webinar, is linking things back to a company's mission and their purpose and their values and their vision. But a couple of things I want to talk about is, our business, Key Business Advisors, we're all about, our mission is to take business from good to great. And I think, this is what this whole webinar is all about. A whole series of webinars is how can we help people to improve their business and get it to that next level. Our purpose is to take our customers on a journey to help them improve through all aspects of employee engagement and performance. And that's really important, because if we've got staff that are engaged in the business, then automatically, the performance is going to grow. 3 areas that we work very, very strong in is the business advice and strategy. We do a lot of professional sales training, customer service training. I have a team of 5 wonderful HR advisors and consultants who are out there helping our clients, with advice and support on what to do to improve on all aspects of staff performance. Okay, so let's get into it. Topic 1 is, what is the true cost when mistakes happen? So, for me, why the simplest mistakes can affect your company reputation and bottom line. And when things don't go to plan, what happens is, and I think a lot of staff don't realise this, but if we make mistakes or things don't follow process, there's always a financial cost that can occur in the business. And then if there's a job that's been done, there's the cost of rework, there's that lack of productivity, and there's a lot of time wasted. So we also look at, if someone leaves suddenly within a business, then there's also a massive loss of knowledge, that intellectual property of IP that walks out. And unfortunately, during the pandemic last year, there were companies that had, staff that left, and then they've employed new staff, and then they've left, and all of a sudden that IP is really, really, really hard. So you've got like a trainee training the next person coming on board. So we don't want that to happen. And disruption within your business will lead to that poor customer service and reputation. So again, I always go into lots of companies and I say, who pays your wages? And the most common answer I get is, it's the owners. So no, it's not, it's your customers, because it's your customers who buy from you and use your products and services, who then pay the owner to then pay you. Staff morale will drop, And sometimes, people will shut down. So if mistakes happen, there's a bit of a blame game. Sometimes it happens in a business. So, we don't want that from happening. And the simplest things, to me, can sometimes create a major havoc in a business. And to me, that's when someone says, oh, that's not my job. And then all of a sudden that just creates a lot of anger and frustration. So for me, simple mistakes can affect your company reputation and bottom line. And the reason why we have policies and procedures in place is to try and minimize them. So how mistakes can affect teamwork and staff morale. And, I'm all about this. How do you have great teamwork? Because great teamwork, if you've got a cohesive team that's working together and they're collaborating and everyone's on the same page, then it works fantastically. But if it's not, then that will affect staff morale. So disagreements between managers and staff or staff within departments will affect staff morale, and it will create a lot of mistakes. When mistakes happen, this creates a lot of stress and anxiety, animosity with people, and then conflict within the workplace. And unfortunately, what happens in today's world is that conflict in the workplace, if it gets a little bit out of control, then all of a sudden we have things like bullying, harassment claims. And at the moment, unfortunately out there, we've got a few of these that are happening, not in our business, within our customers' businesses, because people are not following process, and it's that bit of the blame game that's actually going on, which my team is looking after. Customer outcomes become affected, and I talked about that before. And that role definition of that's not my job creates frustration, and all this puts pressure on a business, which creates a higher workload. So to me, all the above normally creates high staff turnover, which when that happens, that really hurts a business, especially a small business. If I've got a small business of 10 or 15 staff, and I lose 2 or 3 people, then that really hurts. Even worse if it's 5. So any staff turnover hurts the business. Now, Maya, is there anything you want to add to this?
No, I think you've covered it quite well. It's just an overall, I guess, things are put in place for a reason, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to help to mitigate that as much as we can, but also help businesses prepare for, if we do get a turnover, that it doesn't harm the business just as much.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so if I talk about then understand the impact of mistakes to your customers. So, when things go wrong in a business, normally, I always ask this question, you tell me of an organization or a company out there that can survive without customers, because it just doesn't work, yeah? So, whatever work we do inside any company, that's going to affect the customer output. So, customers feel let down, and then that'll create poor customer satisfaction. And this is a big one for me, is when companies let their customers down, that this affects the customer's outcome of what's about to happen. Because, we all have this, chain of services and products and services that we offer that all goes down to the bottom line. So, we support customers, and that helps improve their staff performance, which then creates that the output at the other end. But if mistakes happen and things go wrong, then, or we don't hit our deadlines, then that creates some problems out there. Customers then start to look elsewhere, and now I say always now on the market looking at competitors. And when customers leave your company, again, this affects your bottom line. So this happens due to the lack of trust. So if we haven't got trust within an organisation, that's internally, and our customers don't trust us, then all of a sudden we're going to lose some of those customers. So I'll just put a question out there. What is the true cost that is associated with all the above? And for those of you who are on this webinar, if you want to put a cost you think what would impact on your business, by all means, put that in the chat box, and I'll read some of them out shortly. Okay, so topic 2, understand the value of setting up the right policies linked to your policies and procedures. And I'm now going to hand over to Maya, because this is exactly what our team does out there, is going to companies, not only help them write them, but also help them to implement them and workshop them, and so people understand. So over to you, Maya.
Great, thanks, Colin. Thank you for that. So the first one we've got is understanding the difference between the policies and procedures. Many people think it's the same thing. Well, guess what? It actually is 2 different type of processes, and one is there for they're there for two different reasons. So policies and procedures, regardless of what they are, they should be documented first and foremost, and provided to all the staff as a guideline. What is a policy is the great question. So policies are actually statements that what companies put in place to set the expectations and hold the staff accountable from that perspective. So it's what we call the why behind the action that determines the company's direction. When we're talking about policies, they should be written with an aim, a purpose, and also a measure or an objective that follows through with it to support the decision making. And we also use it as a guideline principle for when we're either talking to a staff member about in conjunction with the process to what they need to follow. And most of these are generally put in by law. So for example, you've got the privacy policy, the employment opportunity, the discrimination, and one of the key ones that businesses often forget about is the whistleblower policy. I've put some there to name a few, but there are some that by legislation we do need to make sure that we've got in place. Where the procedure comes into place, it works in conjunction with the policies. So that provides a step-by-step instruction. So most companies will put in either precedents or guides or processes, you can call them as you may, but they all fall down to a procedure that they need to follow. For example, how to take leave, how to do a certain process. They are considered as the how-to guides. It also helps when we're training a new staff member. So we might put it in there as a reference material so they can be able to go through with that. Especially in our business, we've onboarded 2 new staff members and we have the policies is one thing, but a procedure to show them how to do those particular tasks to action. And then some people might use it as an auditing tool as well to follow a particular process.
Very good.
Did you have any questions for that, Cole?
No, no questions. No, very good. I just might get you to slow your speech down just a tad so it comes out a little bit more clearer. That's all. Yep.
So the next one, we've got an understanding of the value of good policies and procedures. So here we're really talking about when we're putting documents together, they need to mean something. They're not there just for that particular reason. So we talk about that being the stability of that decision-making process. So if we know, for an example, we need to performance manage someone, what do we need to do? And does it have a step-by-step reference to support you in that process? We're also talking about the expectations. So really falling between, okay, we've got a policy on a motor vehicle in our business. So it talks about the do's and don'ts from that. And then in reference to that, we need to follow either the Vic roads in Victoria and those particular standards, as well as our own internal company ones. When we're talking about the value, we're also talking about what references between the federal and state laws. And not just the laws, but the workplace laws that are in play. I've just on social media, you do see that Fair Work are forever posting some information for us to remind us of what's important. So we also need to reference to those particular industry bodies. What it also values is it outlines their unacceptable behaviours. So I talk a lot about the code of conduct, and those who have done policy workshops with myself and the team would notice that one thing we do majorly focus on is when we set the expectations, we also talk about what's not accepted. And I think it's really important to determine the 2 different things there. So specifically on an unacceptable behaviour, we've had experiences where might be a customer facing role and what is not acceptable to talk about in front of that particular customer or say or do. We also talk about what's not tolerated, which goes in conjunction with the unacceptable behaviours, but it does provide further details for that. And the biggest key for me is more about reducing your or minimising your claim coming, if there is one that is to come forward in regards to a fair work or a health and safety situation or any form of liability. So you've always got something to refer to as a business. And the biggest thing we always say, this is all about getting the expectations set for the employee. If you are to ask one of our new staff members, you'll definitely see between, I guess, what we've got versus a company that may not have show the expectations, and at least we're providing a clear direction for that particular staff member.
I think, Maya, you know, the secret is like you have these policies and procedures, which is great, and then secret is how you roll them out and how you educate your staff about the importance of them. And you can have a bit of fun while you're doing that. And I know a recent, you know, you did one with one of our clients, and the business owner they spoke from the heart about how the business got started and everything about, you know, why following good best practice policies and procedures is important for the business. And, you know, it was really engaging. And, you know, one of the guys today gave some feedback. They were so empowered because of the way that that was executed, which you were a part of, which was fantastic. Okay, so why you link company processes to policies and procedures. So Maya, do you want to take us through this slide, please?
Perfect. So absolutely, Colin, with what you just mentioned, this is where the links become into practice. So it's really cool to have these also put in play with communicating these to staff. So it's about, okay, here are the policies and procedures, but what now? What do we do? They're a lovely thick piece of paper if you enjoy printing them out, but then there's also a lot of links to the policies, whether it's through a HRIS system or a folder on your drives. But it's really important to not only have them as documents, but communicating. Which I might bring up here in regards to a case in Fair Work about 2 or 3 years ago that came into play. And this particular person had claimed for a general protections and an unfair dismissal claim. And during that conversation, they talked about they didn't understand the policies. So they were terminated, didn't know what they were signing off on, had been told that they needed to do this particular documentation. But that's all it was. And then the Fair Work came out and said, well, the staff member actually communicated that they didn't understand through the conciliation meeting that they had. And so therefore, from a business perspective, it's really important to communicate those policies regularly to staff. Now, when we're talking about regularly, I'm not saying every day or every week, it's just having that as a reference material, through a HRIS system, or as well as having them part of your team meetings, which we'll get into a little bit shortly, as well as having those policy reinduction workshops. So, and we're talking about setting standards. So when we're putting these, we're having these conversations and we're holding these meetings, we're actually talking to staff about the standard and the expectations that we have as a business. And really, we should be practicing what we preach on a daily basis. We're talking about, like I said, conducting themselves in the workplace, and we do have to have some for a compliance measurement. So when we're talking about it with this particular client that we talked about just before with Colin, they have a heavy compliance base. And now as a business, we may tend to focus on compliance measures because it is the easiest I guess, auditing tool to be able to show whether we are complying with Fair Work requirements. But it's also there for a business to really understand, and not only just have it there, but to understand why it's so important to them as a business. And as we talked about the bullying and harassment earlier on with Colin, it is to mitigate as much as we can. Having processes in place and linking into the policies just shows what we do. So in an event of one of these two occurring, we know that if there is an investigation, what do we then follow? Following steps. And having an idea with the staff where to go to for help. That's the biggest key for me as well. It links them and directs them to who to speak to if they have any questions or concerns.
May, you talked about, to defend or present against claims that, might come back to the business. What happens is when something goes pear-shaped, and it starts to be investigated, the first thing that that happens is, the insurance company, whether it be CGU or whoever's investigating it, if the staff is, on work cover, they want to know, show us their position description, show us their employment contract, and can you show us the policies and your procedures that that are put in place that staff members should follow. And it's those times when the policies are not updated or it's not being rolled out effectively, this is where the employer loses, and it just ends up a real big frustration. And then hence, that's how, if I can say, it keeps us in business, because then people look for companies like us to go and help and implement them. So my point is, be proactive with this, because, it becomes very, very expensive if you don't follow it. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the best ways to roll. No, I'm not going to talk about best ways. You're going to talk about, Maya, the best ways to roll out new policies and procedures for better staff engagement.
And this is one of my favourite things to do. So once we create them, all the hard work's being out there and done of creating them. And let's face it, I've had my fair share of creating a lot of policies, and that's what we're really good at as well. Not just having, whether it's through an HRIS system or any other documents, we actually sit there and help you create real policies that mean something to you. So that's, again, and I guess that's been my biggest achievement in rolling out these particular policies with quite a few clients, where it's not just your standard A to Z policies, it's creating an atmosphere of and making a change, I guess, in the business to keep the staff engaged. So why we do it, and what we're trying to achieve is getting those set of guidelines and expectations, as we keep referring to. It is really all about the expectations, and there's no point of having policies in place if you're never going to preach them to the staff and talk to them and educate them on what needs to happen. But from an employer's perspective, it's how to performance manage effectively. And when we're talking about performance management, we're not talking about just giving them a warning. It's from the start of the recruitment phase all the way through to the termination phase or the resignation phase. It's more about when we're doing certain tasks, how to conduct and how to do particular things is important from an employer perspective to have that guideline. And the biggest thing is also for me is getting people on the same page, the same path, being consistent, and really referring to those documents again. So the how is my favorite part, is reinducting or inducting staff. So I always figure out new and exciting ways to do it. We all know that people say HR is boring, but not for us. We always find it a way to be as entertaining as possible, but also sticking to the facts and compliance as well. What we talk about is creating a workshop that has impact, and as Colin mentioned earlier on in today's session, we like to also incorporate in there the business processes. So the mission, the vision, the values, creating that hype to continue motivating these staff, because the business wouldn't be here without those particular customers. We're also talking about automating the processes, what I refer to a HRIS or online acknowledgement. There's cool ways now through some HRIS systems where you can either do multiple ways of sending out the policies. So during COVID, we had to find innovative ways to send out these policies and start getting staff to really acknowledge these. And we did send 2 to 3 policies a month to share it and educate those staff, and then come back with questions of, did you have any questions about the policy, and potentially quiz some of those staff in regards to those particular policies. And one program that we use in particular does allow you to have an acknowledgement section through there. And it goes into the employee's file, so it records it as a policy that they've checked off. On the flip side, the people that don't have a HRIS system or unsure how to use it, they've probably been using the paper-based. And with those, I'd strongly encourage to have theirs signed off and then do the policy workshops with that. And acknowledging staff who actually do follow the policies. We generally tend to refer to the staff that only don't follow policies, and procedures, but saying, well, thank you so much for actually following these expectations we have in place. And again, through whether it's performance review or corridor conversations, it's really important to acknowledge that as well, because we need to also hold the staff accountable. And when we're referring to people that don't follow process, we need to follow them and hold them accountable and have that conversation with them in regards to why they're not following process.
And you hit the nail on the head there, Maya, because one of the things that I love doing, it's all, I put this as part of business improvement, is your case study, some great outcomes you do with your clients. So we've got a great outcome. This is what we've achieved for our clients. This is how we did it. And everyone followed the process. Everyone followed our policies. And guess what? You know, there was minimal wastage, minimal downtime on the job or on what you achieved. And that made us really, it was a really good profitable. And then you also, when things don't go to plan, you need to go and case study that, saying like, we failed to meet on this customer's demands, and you know, we need to go backtrack. Why did we fail? Where do we lack within our processes or our policies by not getting this done? And that's a great way of what's the word? Of putting something in place, and you're actually workshopping your own business. So you're rewarding. You reward people and acknowledge people, recognition and praise for doing it right. And then if something goes wrong, then yes, you're 100% right, Mayo. You then got to pull them in and say, well, this didn't go to plan. Why? What is it that you don't understand? Because one of the big things that happens at a lot of companies is staff waste a lot of time trying to work things out. Yet we have these policies and these procedures and our process on how to do things, but people don't follow them. So that's why, again, why this webinar to me is very, very important. Okay.
And if I can just touch on that one, Cole, the other thing that I do notice is, and again in businesses, is or not knowing where they're actually stored. So that's the biggest one for me. So just recently with a particular client, we've got the HRIS system created for them, and now I'm referring them to start putting them under the general documents tab for all the procedures. So it's got a common location to be able to know that is the most up-to-date information or steps to follow. Whereas we know we've all got a version of SharePoint or OneDrive or all these unique and wonderful systems out there that hold storage, but are they the most up-to-date and the most common referred to document for the business?
They've got to be able to find it, that's for sure. Okay, take us through this next slide, please, Maya.
So we're talking about express the importance why every individual needs to follow the right process in your business. So when we're talking about this particular slide, we're looking at, yes, the expectations and standards of the business, but also the individual. So it's really important to note there is, yes, the business has an expectation, but when you're recruiting and onboarding these particular people, you've also got that expectation there for them. You know, we do refer back to the position descriptions and people practicing what we employ them for. That is really important to understand those standards as well. We talk about allowing managers to follow a process. I'll use an example here. For me, it was a couple of months ago, I had a client where we rolled out quite a few policies between different clients, and we set the same expectations, set the same steps for both clients, and client A did a wonderful job in having the managers engaged in that as well. So really getting them to own the policies just as much as the staff members, or as much as the owner needed to really understand them. And then client B actually just rolled them out with the managers and really didn't focus on it thereafter. And when you see the difference in the steps followed, the outcomes that come out of that in particular is that once people follow those steps, a really good outcome and a really clear vision and direction for the business. Whereas client B, we've consistently having performance management issues because we're not following those steps. So can we talk about dealing with the unacceptable conduct and performance in the business? And I guess that's where I go with client B. From now on, that's our next steps, is for getting them to actually follow those particular processes and holding them accountable. And it in turn raises the professional standards, and then we talk about it being great HR best practice.
Yeah, that's for sure. We definitely want to build that HR best practice into a business. And again, we can't stress this enough. Like, you know, it's people have them, but you know, are they followed? Okay, so ways to implement your new policies and procedures.
Yes, great question or great statement. So the ways that we would like it is when someone asks what the procedure is, let's make a note and create one. So first and foremost, we might actually already have it, but whether it's a small business, and we like to refer that everything's in our head. So we all have it in our head and not written on paper. And it's while you're inducting or having a new recruit come into play. And I use this with our new starter, Stephanie, and talk about, well, oh, that's a great question. It is in my brain, but let's put it down pen to paper and let's create a procedure from it. Or if we need to create a policy because it needs to link to the procedure. Hold brainstorming sessions with the team to review the policies and procedures as part of quality assurance or improvement. A few of our retail stores do a really good job at this in particular. They choose a policy a fortnight to talk about as part of their morning sessions when they do hold a longer time. And they just say, is it current, is it relevant, what questions come out of those particular sessions, and answer those questions in those sessions or after those sessions, and update the documentation. Where I love the next point there, allowing managers and team leaders to support and provide feedback. That's what I talked about in client A, having the opportunity, whether it's when we're doing a reinduction or a management meeting or even a staff meeting that we do every month or every quarter, holding them just as accountable as a business owner or as a director to actually understand and get them to talk about it. And you'll actually see the drive and the change between the managers as well. Review the few policies in our each management training session. And again, using that for feedback. One of the classic queries that comes out to me is the leave policy. And the expectations versus the current standards sometimes are two different things. Medical certificates. It's important and you're allowed as business owners and the managers to be able to ask for medical certificates at any given time. But however, your policy may not state that. Your policy might state after 2 days it needs a medical certificate, or maybe it talks about either side of a public holiday or a weekend, if they work weekends, you can actually ask for additional documentation and requirements as part of that. But we need to make sure that the policies are aligned.
Another good one of that, Maya, is definitely when people ring in sick, what is your policy? Is it a text? Is it an email? Is it a phone call? And who do they call? Who do they need to speak to and advise? I think that's a big one that gets let down out there in the market.
It definitely is. Yeah, absolutely. Dealing with a situation at the moment where they're constantly texting or even not calling is one of the ones. And what do you do if they don't actually come in and they don't call? What happens then? There's a lot of question marks. What steps do I need to follow? Your policy should all outline that, along with what procedure then follows with it. So definitely, I do not enjoy text messages being one of the forms of communication. And I think a lot of business owners would appreciate that as well, not being the method. It should always be a phone call. And if the manager is not available or haven't answered the phone call, ask them to call back and then try again in a couple of minutes or in an hour or so. And then by doing all the above, we'll safeguard the company as much as we can. You know, it's really important to have these things in place.
You know, Maya, the amount of times I've had a conversation with a business owner where he said, well, hang on a tick, this is common sense, right? Why are the lawyers going down this path? Well, because it wasn't documented and articulated, this is what your policy was. And that's a really good wake-up call to anyone on this webinar. If you don't have things documented, right, then it's open to interpretation. And then when things go wrong, that's when, you know, that's where business owners and companies lose because they're not followed properly. Okay,
If I could just
so
add to that, sorry, Colin, just to add to that, is my biggest ways I generally identify when people don't either have policies in place or how they haven't been updated is when you actually get a work cover claim. I have had many clients that have come on from an ad hoc perspective and they say, yeah, we've got all these policies in place. They'll send the file through and then I look at particular documentation and it actually might be a 5-page policy document. And it doesn't refer to anything that they've been asked from the work cover agent. And then having to show that, yes, we don't have it, but however, staff understand the procedure because they're told that induction. But induction might have been 7 or 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even 2 years ago. And chance to remember that now and today may not be the case. So it's really important to update them.
I think, you know, one of the things that we always talk about with our clients, Mayor, is, you know, when should you refresh your position descriptions? Well, okay, number one, if there's a position changed, of course, straight away. But if not, every couple of years, I think every 2 years, you should relook at your org chart and then look at the roles and responsibilities and change it. And then alternatively, every 2 years, you relook at your policies as well. So you can update policies as you need them on the go, but then if you've got policies that have been there that haven't been touched for some time, then things change in a business. And like we had the biggest change of all time last year with the pandemic. And so many people were left trying to find a policy from working from home and trying to find a policy for, it was a pandemic. And again, it's, you know, I had a meeting with a client, you know, last week where everything was paper-based. So, you know, like they couldn't, you know, it was hard to get that paper-based, some of their policies out to their staff. It was emailed, but it wasn't acknowledged properly. So again, by having the right systems in place, it's really, really important. So I want to talk to you about, you know, how to address staff who don't follow policies and procedures. So you want to make sure that you don't have a policy procedure mismatch. And May just talked about that. So it's important that all managers and team leaders, especially in the business, are across your policies and procedures. So if you have mismatched policies, one department to another department or one person to another person, and they don't understand it, then that's going to create some havoc. So you want to practice what you preach and put it in and say, right, is this what they're doing? And I agree with what you said, Mayor, before. If you pick a couple of policies each month to work on, if you haven't done that in a long time, it's a great way to try and get some things up. But managers and staff should all be on the same page on how we do things. And then you can do things like test the knowledge and make it a bit of fun. Do some policy quizzes. And you know, I downloaded the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire question and answers, and I did that in the middle of last year when everyone was working from home, and created a bit of a policy quiz just to have a bit of fun and realign with everything that we're doing to make sure they're all on the same page. You want to make sure, as I said, your policies are aligned with you said it before, Mayor, with your mission, vision, and values. So, you know, when we do a policy workshop, when we're talking about something, I like to link it to this is why we're in business. These are our KPIs, our goals and objectives, what we're trying to do. And if we follow our policies and our procedures, we will make this happen. You got to think about the cost of if it's not, if there's a mismatch, what's going to cost your business, and don't talk jargon so people don't understand. And you know, I think that's one of the things that I really love about my team in this business of Mayor and the other guys that go out to a client, because you might read a policy that might be written by, if I use the word an IR lawyer. I'm not putting anything there with IR, but it's some terminology that you know, if I use it, people who are not in that industry don't quite understand. So keeping it simple, which is the old KISS, is a great way of making sure that people understand it. So think about this is all about common sense, right? But people got, and I talked about that before, like people say, oh, it's common sense, they should know this. It's just got to be make sure it's written down so people can read it and understand it. So when you're putting a new staff member on and you're going through your policies and your procedures, you ask them if there's something you don't understand or you're a bit confused about, please come back and highlight that to me so we can actually fix it. I think ways to address staff in a situation for the best outcome. So, you know, this comes back to those informal discussions in the first instance by referring them back to the policy procedure of what's happened. Look, we've had a situation here. Let's go back to our policy procedure and let's have a conversation. You want to You use that as a case study, reiterate it, and get other staff to reread the policies and acknowledgement to get them to sign off. We've made some mistakes, we're not following our process. You could hold a staff meeting, go over what happened, how relevant, how to prevent it from happening again, and then discuss ways to, mitigate hazards and incidents from, occurring. And, OH&S, there are policies in OH&S. We're talking about HR, but it's no different from an OH&S process. And I think, after multiple meetings and you've had some verbal and informal discussions, you must start that formal counselling process and have a meeting to address that, which is, another conversation about performance counselling. But, my advice, and I'm sure you'll back me up on this, Maya, is you need to document and create, and put some file notes of people who are not following the process or your policies and procedures. And then when you're having the conversation, you can give them examples of what's actually happened. And again, that if someone's dismissed from a business and they sit back, I've been unfairly dismissed. No, you haven't, because these are the conversations that we've had. It's all documented, and you choose not to follow those.
That's right. And it's funny enough of situations where you've actually just done a policy reinduction workshop, or they've just provided you with a sign-off that they've read the policies. And then weeks, not even a couple of months later, and we see ourselves in a performance counselling discussion. And I guess that's where they say, yeah, I did read it, and it was on this particular date that you've acknowledged it, and you even asked questions during the situation of the induction or the reinduction, and then we're in this meeting. And I guess it's really important to understand that whether, yes, they're asking questions, but does that even mean that they're understanding those particular conversations that we're having with them? And that, like you said, Colin, keeping it simple and perhaps even simplifying it through those conversations a little bit more further, or rewording it, or reviewing the conversation that you're having with them. And yes, we always talk about how to conduct yourself. This is the biggest part. Behavioural and situation are two different things, but at the same time, we need to look at how we can integrate those conversations together in this process.
Yeah. Last Tuesday, Lily and Alison did a session. I actually went to it. I was dying to see them in action, and I love doing that because it's a way that I can give some good feedback and stuff like that. And they were both fantastic. And what they did was they just went through, if I can say it, was probably about a 25-point PowerPoint presentation, but it was all dot pointed, like 3 or 4 dot points. And what they did was they covered the main topics of that policy so everyone understood. And then after that meeting, the policy manual went out to everybody for them to read them and acknowledge them and sign it up. And approve that they've acknowledged they've read it through the HRIRS system. But I think what was really motivating by that is they kept it engaged. People were there, and then a couple of questions was raised. Well, what happens in this situation? What happens in that situation? And it was so good that one particular comment was made around just doing some extra hours, and what's our policy if we do extra hours that we've been asked to do. Now, I know we get paid overtime, but do we have a policy like, can we choose to have time off in lieu and stuff like that? And that was a really good question. And you go, so straight away, the ladies went back and go, well, okay, that's never been raised before. Never thought about that. Because that's the way the business is always run. So I went back to the owner, and now they've created that change to give the option of either or. And again, that's all about staff engagement. So you can turn these into a positive way of doing things. So how to re-educate your staff to get them back on track to avoid future mistakes. And we just talked about that. There it is, the company reinduction. And this company decided to do it because of everyone's work from home, and now they're getting people back into the workplace, and they want to resettle everyone, get them back to following the right processes of what they want. And obviously, working from home was discussed in that for those who work at home, because they've got mixed shifts of people coming in and so on. And I think the other thing too was, just get everyone on the same page with, there's been some change in that business. They've gone more into the cloud, so they've got new procedures, new policies on how to use some of their systems, and they want to roll that out. A policy workshop that sets out the expectations and standards, and Maya, we've given a few case studies of that. And then there's things like toolbox pre-start meetings. So, you have a startup meeting in the morning or something like that. That's a good opportunity to go over a few policies to check, and the understanding of that everyone's on board. And we did it this morning. I asked the question, where's our fire exit? Should there be a fire in our building? We've come back in, and we awarded somebody to be our fire warden this morning as well, which I thought was fantastic. So, and that took no more than, I think, maybe 3 or 4 minutes to go through that. And then we'll go through and set up a process now and a procedure and make sure that all happens, and we'll do a fire drill. So that's all part and parcel of what we need to do. So I think
if I can touch on, sorry, if I can touch on that with the pre-starts, and it's really a good idea, I guess, if it's a common language throughout the business, to be able to bring in policies or procedures or discussions, even just something like what we did this morning. No one's expected to read it right now or just before the meeting, but it's that common expectations of knowing what to do in an event of an emergency or so forth. But can I also mention, for ISO accreditation, and from a WHS perspective, that's actually one of the biggest things that's discussed, especially if you're becoming accredited in different types of businesses and industries, whether it's through NDIS, whether it's through the national health standards, or any even retail associations. That is something that's commonly asked, is what do you do with these particular documentation to keep up with that particular standard?
Yep, 100%. And as we got there, it's all about the importance of explaining the meaning of the policy procedures, and the best practice is to refresh. You're 100% right. So, because these guys get audited, is it every 12 months or 2 years? I think, Maya, every 12 months. We've got one client that gets audited every 12 months. So they come along and audit and want to know that what's your system, how you roll it out to keep that iOS accreditation. So, as a small business,
and not just from that. Yeah, and not just from that perspective, I want to see what you've done during that particular time, not that you've just updated it. What are you doing to stay current and up to date and until the next audit?
So my point was, Maya, is if I'm not looking for an iOS accreditation, but I just want to raise the bar of my business, then you want to put that in place. By the way, I do a lot of work with clients who want to sell their business, set it up for sale. And what I find really interesting is, when they come to us and say, listen, we want to sell our business over the next 12, 18 months, one of the first things we start working on is their policies and procedures to get that to place, right?
The compliance.
Why haven't you had that before in the past? I've never had the time, right? Would you imagine what would happen if you had that? And one particular client said to me that, geez, we're more efficient now than we've ever been. I go, well, do you really want to sell your business now because it's making money? So it is about putting those best practice standards. Right. Okay, I'm going to finish up on topic 5. So setting new goals and objectives for better performance outcomes. All right. So the value of brainstorming for better business continuous improvement. Now, I like the word continuous improvement because when you talk about policies and procedures to people, they go, oh my God, this is boring, da 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 da. But if you talk about continuous improvement, right? What this is all about is, better business development. This is about how to improve. And by doing this, this is a really good opportunity about setting some new goals and objectives of this is what we need to do, how to get to here. And in many ways, if you want to create some sort of change management in your business, by redefining some of your processes and your policies and procedures, that will help with the change management. Brainstorming and bouncing ideas off one another is really, really good, and diversify. So, seek opinions and look at different options. Sometimes the best ideas come within the team. And, when you've employed somebody from another business, what commonly comes out is, oh, this is a process that we did and it worked, or this is a process we did and it didn't work, right? So sometimes it's good to go and, have that bit of a think tank and brainstorming session. You've got to think about, your internal and external output. And to me, that's a conversation I like to do. So how are we going to become more effective and efficient internally? And then how are we going to be and do exactly the same with our output as well? So we actually can deliver, on time or exceed customers' expectations in advance. There are ways that you can do to find things out. We're very big on doing things like conducting a staff satisfaction survey. We do employee staff satisfaction surveys because they bring true huge value. And sometimes you get a few home truths that come out in those because they're anonymous. And I think again, I can't push that enough, the value of doing that. And continual improvement keeps your staff engaged. So it's not like, it's not a boring day, it's not the same Groundhog Day every day in the business. We're always trying to change. And, we do create changes and we put in new processes and new systems, but then it's all about finishing that off with what are our policies and procedures around this. So when you're setting new benchmarks through team communication, you can do things like software solutions such as Zoom, Teams and Zoom. Now again, we live in a world now where last year during the pandemic, we worked out a way on how to communicate with one another. So there's no reason why we can't do that. And Mayor's talked about things like an HRIS system that can send information directly to the staff. I think that's invaluable for every business of today. And again, you put a new policy in, it takes 3 seconds to send it out. You can have a meeting saying I sent out a new policy. What did anyone read? Do a bit of a workshop with it, or do it vice versa. Do the workshop, then send out the policy. It depends on what you want to do, but as long as you do something that has that staff engagement, that's what's important.
And they recreate the conversation. It just re-engages. I think just over the weekend, I got an email about a particular timesheet. We got talking about a timesheet policy, and now what it's done is what we thought was actually happening through another payroll and rostering system versus to what it actually does. And the technicalities behind it, it's raised questions. So what happens in the event of these technicalities that come through? And it was something that, again, like we said through our previous conversation, it's not something that comes up until it actually happens. So being able to then use that opportunity to improve or update as required.
100%. I think, you can create things like that, that training online and face-to-face, and to get that engagement, we all should have our procedure manual or a handbook or something that's sitting somewhere. And from an OH&S point of view, if you're working in a factory, you'll see that there's things on the wall, safety, all the above. It's all laid out the process. We've got to make sure that that happens internally within a business, within an office, especially. Or in a retail store, we're educating people about, this is the way we do things. You could be driving a bus, and this is our policy, our procedure of how we park the bus, leave it in good care, lock up the bus, all that sort of stuff. It's simple, but it just needs to make sure that it's in some sort of procedure policy manual. I think managing upwards as well, I think is really, really important. So, you want your team to come to you to say, listen, I think we need to update this policy because it's no longer relevant. All right, or we've changed our systems. Getting that in place creates, you've got a team that's working 100% for you by that happening. You want to encourage that. And then going to the source for queries for the best outcomes. So, if something goes wrong, we'll go to the source and how do we get the best outcomes from this? So again, companies of today, we need more teamwork more so than ever, and we need more cohesion and, as I said, that collaboration on how to do things. So the value of celebrating the milestone achievements. Well, for me, if you've got this, it creates positive morale and good attitude from staff, and it will create a wonderful culture within your business. And if you've got this happening in your business, you put somebody else on, those staff will take that new employee under their wing and show them the way. And the thing that we call have in our business, this is the KBA way we do things. You want to create that in your business. You want to become more efficient as making less mistakes. And I mentioned that at the start, the more you can minimise mistakes in your business, the more profitable you're going to be. Create that collaboration between staff and, as it says there, more effective in accountability and performance. Better team output and that staff recognition and praise. And I said that before, when you win a big job or you do a big job, you just want to make sure that we're all on the same page of what those outcomes are. So I hope you've enjoyed our webinar. We always have a heap of HR documents and checklists and stuff like that on our website that you can go and download. It's all for free. You know, that's all about trying to help our customers. They get a bit of a taste of what we're all about as well. And I know during this webinar, we have a lot of existing customers on the webinar, which I think is fantastic. So it's a great way to one of our customers has just said, thank you very much for this webinar, which I think is fantastic. If you've got any questions, you know, our call line number is 1300 for advice, or you can email us or go to our website. Our website is very feature rich of what we do, and there's heaps of tips and stuff on that website that can help you implement things. There's a whole library of previous webinars, and you know, last year during COVID, we're doing one a week at one stage. There's plenty there. You can book a 15-minute free chat with myself or Maya, or you can email us directly. We don't care. We just want to help businesses, you know, to go from good to great, which is what our catchphrase is all about, what our mission. Our next webinar is all about topics, which is all about implementing HR best practice in your business, because I think that, you know, a lot of companies last year were in that survival mode, but we've got to get back to business now, and we've got to make sure that we've got things happening. So I'm going to talk about what is HR best practice, and I'm going to be joined by Alison Fletcher, who's another one of our consultants equivalent to Maya in the business, and we'll talk about the value of employee engagement, better ways to recruit and induct new staff into your business, which links back to what we're talking about today, and improve staff performance outcomes, because I think that's the thing that we want now is how do we get our business to the next level? How do we get it humming? And I really am very big on the importance of succession planning. So you know, we had a lady in our business that was with us for 7 years, and you know, due to what happened last year, you know, she's decided to move on. Better suits her life, her lifestyle, and you know, and it has not impacted us at all because of the succession planning of what's happened within this business. So I think, you know, this is what it's all about. You know, we employ staff, and you know, staff turnover hurts the business, but if you've got some depth and you've built some skill level up in your business and someone moves, then if you can employ or grow within, then that's just a great feeling as a business owner. So on that note, thank you very, very much, Maya, for assisting me. And is there something you want to add to that?
I was just going to mention one thing that I've found has been effective over the last couple of years. When someone does leave, the change that can come with that, especially since COVID and now, is reevaluating where you are at. What do you want to do as a business? You know, the role may have worked up until then, or you could have seen a slight change in the needs for particular roles, but once that particular person leaves or people leaving your business is able to say, okay, well, that role, are we replacing that role, or we're going to, perhaps that role was too big for one person, or we want to move that role to a part-time role. So having the opportunity to reassess and replan what you want to do with that role within that in your business.
Yeah, 100%. A question comes through, Maya. What about when staff leave? You know, should you have a policy on social media because they're still working with, you know, they've left since 12 months ago and they're saying that they're working for the company. You know, my answer to that, and I'll get your answer in a sec, Maya, is, you know, part of your process, part of your procedures in a business and part of your policy is when someone's leaving on that last day, you sit down, you go through a checklist and you make sure that all of that is addressed and signed off on before they leave. That is part of that process. Anything you want to add to that, Maya?
So first and foremost, we should be having a policy that would cover the social media aspects, whether that's during their employment or after their employment. So something along the lines of, whilst if your role such as ours, we are always on LinkedIn as well. So if you're someone that is a constant contributor to LinkedIn or social media posts, is being able to identify and differentiate the posting, I guess, on behalf of the business, but also the do's and don'ts in that particular policy, absolutely as part of the exit questionnaire and the exit checklist, especially on the exit checklist, just ticking off to say that we've talked about it, and also updating it while you're with that particular person. Because if you do say to them, we'll do it after, or we've just reminded you of it, it's really important to get them done while they're there and then and there, to take it off or change it as completely finished from employment.
Yep.
Any other questions?
No, that's it. We can give a couple more case studies, but we're actually it's nearly 2 o'clock. But you know, I think it's the behaviour sometimes, Maya, is that we see, and we've certainly seen with the lockdown in February, that 5-day lockdown that happened, some huge pressure in some businesses where people have lost a bit of their cool, and that's sort of coming back to bite them now. So I think it's it's really important that you've got to, for people's well-being, you've got to stay motivated, and you've got to reiterate. It comes back to that leadership within the business. You've got to make sure that you keep moving forward and you address some of those things. So something so simple as just one of our clients has been blown totally out of proportion, and again, so the focus of that business now is not on the business, it's on putting out some fires. And that's not what business is about. You're supposed to come to work, love your job, love your business, and grow. That's what we want as business owners, so and employees. So stay focused, everyone.
If I can just add on that one part, and I know I love talking about policies and procedures and steps, but the biggest one that I found now is really people wanting to come back to work. And that could be a whole nother topic and a whole nother webinar we could be doing, but especially right now, since we're kind of in that post-COVID life of people returning back to work. So just being mindful that you might actually have a lot of rejection of staff not wanting to come back to the office, or you want them to come, but because of flexible working arrangements, we need to look at accommodating. So be mindful of that whole aspect, and do come talk to us, because it is one of the biggest things that we're actually seeing, and staff not following a particular either working from home policy or not having one, versus returning back to work and consulting the staff about returning back to work. That's probably one keynote to talk about post this discussion today.
We've brought that up on our on the previous webinar, part of that, Maya, but we talked about that in the previous. And there's documents on our website that you can download to have a bit of that conversation. So thank you very much, everyone.
Correct.
And very well noted. If anyone's struggling with that, please contact us, because we're here to help. So thanks very much for attending this webinar, and that concludes the webinar for today. And we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar this time next month. So thank you very much. Thanks, May. You were wonderful.
Thank you. See you. Bye. Bye.